Hello and welcome to the Flash Fantasy Variety Show. I am today's host, and on behalf of all of us here, we thank you for watching, and we hope you enjoy. Keeper of the Sea. The weak wooden shutters rattled with ferocity as the wind beat against them again and again, groaning and creaking under the repeated pressure. The old man sat, sunken in an ancient plush armchair, somehow older than its occupant, wrinkled hands rubbing his temple as he tried to block out the incessant noise of the storm outside. It was late, almost midnight, and he had found no sleep. It had been long already since he had left his bed, seeking respite in his favorite chair, but none came. The storm had only seemed to increase in its intensity, gusts of air and sheets of rain slamming against the stone brick of his lighthouse. He sat there, in the dim light, head pounding with every thunderclap that echoed across the sky. His room lit by nothing except for a small oil lamp atop his nightstand on the other side of the room. His room, lit by nothing except for a small oil lamp, stood atop his nightstand on the other side of the room. His chair sat against the wall on the edges of the lamp's flame. The window on the far side of the circular room continued to pound, its shutters still flying wildly in the storm. He sat back, lamenting his choices that had led him to keeping this lighthouse. As he thought, he stared at the artifact hanging on the wall above his chair. An old harpoon from the days of America's founding, passed down through his family, eventually now to him. It was covered in dust, but the blade still glimmered in the light, each spiked prong looking deadly as ever. It had not seen anything but the inside of this lighthouse for decades, but the heirloom still brought the old man comfort in his duties. Finally, however, the noise became unbearable, and grumbling to himself, he stood up. The chair let off a chorus of creaks as the man's weight shifted off of it. Walking across the floor, he reached the window and stared at the shutters. The bolts holding them in place, long since rusted out, caused them to swing wildly, creating the loud noise that kept him from sleep. Fury consumed him, and he threw open the window. Rain and wind buffeted against him, but he paid it no mind. Leaning out, he grabbed the first shutter and wrenched it from the outside wall, throwing it off into the dark. He did the same with the second, before stopping to catch his breath, leaning out into the rain. That's when he noticed. It was dark. Unusually dark. Looking up, he grumbled and swore under his breath. "Damn storm turned off the light," he scoffed, staring up at the top of the lighthouse, now dark. Ducking back in through the window, he shook his head, letting the rainwater drip off of his hair. He grabbed the lantern from his bedside table and approached the metal ladder against the other wall of the room. Stretching slightly, he grabbed the first cold rung and climbed slowly up, pushing open the hatch in the ceiling and pulling himself over the edge into the enclosed room at the top, housing the massive light. Staring at the large glass case in the center containing the light bulbs, he hit it with his fist before grabbing the lever on the wall and proceeding to reset the light's mechanism. After a few tries, it began to spin again, and after another moment, the light returned, the beams biting out into the night, creating passages of visibility through the dark and the storm. The rocky shore of northeastern Maine, dotted by forest, and the port town his lighthouse provided safe passage to, greeted him in the distance. He could somewhat see back down to the ground of his own island now, the small rocky outcropping jutting out of the tumultuous ocean, small wooden jetty reaching out towards the far shore, its dinghy being battered back and forth by the angry waves. Looking down, his heart froze, and panic filled him. Outlined slightly in the dark, looked like a human figure, sprawled out on the rocks of the shore, seemingly clambering its way out of the relentless waves that beat against it. The man cursed again under his breath, fearing the outage of the lighthouse had caused some tragedy, and clambered quickly down the ladder. Running down the stairs of his room, spiraling down the tower, he reached the ground floor, and speedily donned his heavy jacket and hat, barely stopping to adjust as he pulled on his boots. Throwing open the door, he charged out into the rain, holding his heavy hat with one hand to stop the monstrous gusts of wind from taking it away. The rain fell in heavy, thick sheets, making it near impossible to see, but he held his lantern aloft before him, hoping it could help. All he could hear was the sound of waves pounding as he ran across the rocky ground towards the shore a couple 100 yards ahead of him. Speeding as fast as his old bones could carry him, he reached the shore. Throwing up an arm to shield himself from the spray, the ravenous sea was kicking up. Desperately, he waved his lantern around in the darkness, trying to spot the figure he had seen. "Hey! Hey!" he called out. "Is anybody there?" He yelled into the pounding rain and crashing waves. Reaching the direct shoreline, he was forced backwards by the wild spray of the thrashing sea as he frantically searched for what he had seen. A thunderclap above shook him to his core. He turned around in shock, prepared to flee back to his home, when he saw it. A soft glow in the dark. 2 yellow spots, glowing dully. Eyes. His body froze, and his head began to race. He turned, and he ran. Never mind the slick rocks below him, he ran like nothing else mattered. Throwing open his door, he leapt inside, slamming it shut behind him and resting his back against it. His mind raced. That was no human. What the fuck was out there? What the fuck had crawled out of the raging sea and dragged its loathsome self onto his rocks, onto his home? Forcing himself to breathe lest he have a heart attack, the man gingerly set his lantern down on the table next to the door and let himself breathe. Locking his door behind him, he began to walk up the staircase spiraling up the tower, hands bone white as they gripped the railing, boots and coat still on. Another flash of lightning streaked by the windows as he ascended, followed by an earth-shaking thunderclap. Then he heard it, a sort of thunk against wood. His blood ran cold, and he slowly turned his head to look back down the stairs. Nothing. And then another thunk. The front door moving slightly against the force. It was trying to get inside. Another thunk, harder this time, shook the door slightly more. The man began to sprint, ascending the stairs faster than he ever had as the strikes against the door continued. Each time the wood flexed under the assault. Reaching his room, he frantically searched for something he could use. Anything. Could he hide under his bed? No, surely he wouldn't fit. Could he barricade his door? No, he had far too little furniture and far too little strength to do so. The pounding continued, louder and with more force now. Panic ran hot in his face as the man's eyes darted around his room before finally landing on something. The harpoon, still sharp enough to pierce the flesh of any whale. Without hesitating, he rushed forwards and grabbed it from the wall, dust coming with it as he wrenched it from its decades-long resting place. The weight and grip felt good in his hands, and the steel barbs still looked sharp as they ever could be. Gripping it tightly, he ran back down the stairs towards the ever-loudening slamming against his door. Reaching the bottom of the stairs, he unlocked the door with one hand and slammed shoulder first against it, sending it flying open. A loud thwack echoed out as it struck whatever was on the other side. A loud, startled screech rang out from whatever was struck. The man grimaced at the sound. It was not something he had ever heard before. The tone sounded warped almost. Dashing through the open door into the storm, he readied himself, fear being aided by full adrenaline. He backed away across the rocks from his home, facing towards it, and he stood. A shape slowly emerged from the darkness beside his door, coming into view. It was vaguely humanoid, taller than him by about a head or so, and stocky. The darkness didn't depict much, but he could see its head. Shaped oddly, almost like that of a piranha, or maybe an anglerfish. Its mouth was slightly open. 2 rows of long, slender, and deathly sharp teeth were set into its upper and lower jaw, dripping with some kind of saliva. There was no nose that he could see, but its piercing yellow eyes glowed softly and were unmistakable in the darkness. Its skin was scaly and an aquamarine green color. A crest of bone plate sat on its head and trailed down its back. It was muscular. Formed arms and chest visible through the haze of rain. Spiked plates jutted from the back of his wrists and up the back of its arms, the points looking deadly. Its hands and feet were webbed together, but sharp, pointed claws adorned the edge of each digit. Between its legs, a frilled and spiky tail swung slowly back and forth. Gills lined its neck and the sides of its chest, flexing in and out slightly as it began to stalk towards the man. Hunching over slightly, it stopped, lowering its head and stretching its arms out. The man did the same. Widening his stance, he planted his feet down on the rocks, and shaking with fear, leveled the point of the harpoon towards the beast. They stood opposite each other for what felt like an eternity, the beast unblinking and still, and the man shaking with fear. The rain pounded heavily down around them, and thunder boomed above. A bolt of lightning lit up the sky in a brilliant flash of white, and the beast charged. Bounding on all fours, it raced towards the man before leaping up. Another flash of lightning, and the beast came down upon him. The man, in a stroke of sheer luck, had raised his harpoon just enough that upon its descent the beast landed onto its points in the center of its chest. The impact caused the man to topple backwards, the beast on top of him. It let out a guttural shriek as they hit the ground, and it sunk deeper onto the shaft of the harpoon. Saliva and blood splattered the man's face as the beast convulsed on the point, striking and clawing the rocky ground in a frenzy. Blue blood drained onto the ground as the creature thrashed wildly, continuing to shriek. The man was able to slide himself backwards on his elbows, and he wrenched the harpoon towards him, ripping it out of the beast with a fleshy squelch. A torrent of blue blood came spraying onto him as he pushed himself to his feet. Shaking and breathing heavy, blood-soaked harpoon held lightly in his hand. The beast was gripping the hole in its chest as it screamed in pain, blood pouring from between its claws and splashing onto the rocky ground. The beast lurched forwards, charging towards the man, who stepped back in fear, attempting to shield his face. The creature shrieked again as it ran, rushing past the man and across the shore. The man turned in shock and watched as it jumped into the raging sea, still clutching at its chest, and swam out away from the shore before slipping under the waves and disappearing from view. The man took a second to compose himself and slow his heart before he walked back towards his home. Closing and locking the door behind him, he ascended his stairs, slower this time, and reaching his room, leaned the still dripping blood harpoon against the leg of his armchair. Sitting down, he let himself sink into the plush fabric, still soaked, blood-covered, and wearing his coat, hat, and boots. He sank into his chair, and he placed his hands on his slick temple. Leaning his head back, he closed his eyes. Thank you for tuning in to the Flash Fantasy Variety Show today. We hope you enjoyed that story, and we'd love to see you again soon.